But I'm going to introduce the next chapter, which is the second branch of what we call inferential statistics. So let's try to review. Under inferential statistics, if you recall, we had two things. What were the two things that we could do in inferential statistics? What would we just focus on? The whole process, we were doing what? We were doing estimation. Okay? And under estimation, we used a sample statistic to make an inference about a population parameter, whether it be x bar to make an inference about mu, or p hat to make an inference about p, the population proportion. They want to remember what the second branch of inferential statistics was that we haven't done yet. That's what we're moving into. Okay, very good. So the second one, and that was something we talked about in week 1 actually, is hypothesis testing. And I think you guys all know what a hypothesis is, because somewhere in like 7th grade science it's beat into our head what a hypothesis is. And there's a 3-word definition, if you recall. What is a hypothesis? If you guys remember that? An educated guess, right? An educated guess. Like, this is something we think. So we've heard that before. A hypothesis is an educated guess. And we are going to test a hypothesis. We're putting out an educated guess, and we're seeing if there's evidence to support that hypothesis. Okay. So before we cover statistical hypothesis testing, let's talk about a form of hypothesis test that happens all the time in our court system when there's a criminal trial. Okay, so, and this will kind of frame, just like when you guys guessed my weight, that kind of framed how we use estimation. This is going to kind of frame how we do statistical hypothesis testing. So if you think about it, in a criminal trial, what is the hypothesis that we're trying to prove? If we're the state, if we are Pennsylvania or the federal government, what are we trying to prove? The defendant is guilty, right? Did it, okay. So this is true in the statistical hypothesis test as well. The hypothesis that we start out with is the defendant is guilty. And it's what we're trying to prove. And it is known as, and this goes by a couple names, and this is something you need to write down, H sub 1, right? That's what we see here, H sub 1. It's also called the alternative hypothesis. And it's also called the research hypothesis. Because it is what we're trying to prove. H sub 1 is what we're trying to prove. Not approve, prove. Because we see alternative, that must mean there is a different hypothesis, and there is. There's one that we start with, we call the null. It's not H sub 0, that's null, like null meaning nothing. So this is called the null, N-U-L-L, hypothesis. And it is what we assume to be true at the beginning of this process. And what do we assume to be true at the start of a criminal trial? In the American judicial system. Yes, sir. Very good. We assume that the defendant is innocent. Okay? So the same thing is true in a statistical hypothesis test. We're going to start out with two hypotheses. The one we're trying to prove is called the alternative or research or H sub 1. And there's something that we're going to hold as true. We're going to call it the null hypothesis. So what's the next step in the process? What's the next step in the process? So that's how we start a criminal trial. Then what happens? What happens? Yes? Very good. So the next step is evidence is offered. And if we think about it, in a criminal trial, evidence is things like witness testimony, DNA evidence, fingerprints, bloody gloves, those kinds of things, right? Murder weapons, all those things. That is evidence that is presented. Yes? Right? In a statistical hypothesis test, what do you think the evidence is going to be? Not bloody gloves. What is the statistical evidence going to be? What do you think? We're going to take samples, right? And that sample is an evidence, right? That is samples. Like we're trying to prove that, the average stat student has an IQ higher than 100. Well, how can we prove that? We can start sampling stat students and testing their IQ. That's evidence, yes? So evidence is offered. And it's the same thing. We're going to offer evidence. Ours is going to be statistical evidence, not physical evidence or DNA evidence. And then we have to make a decision. What's a decision that can be made in a criminal trial? If the evidence is enough, what decision do we make in a criminal trial? If the evidence is enough. Come on, Tommy, what decision do we make if there's enough evidence?
Guilty.
Okay, so we're going to call that decision 1. Okay, and in a criminal trial, you're right, we say the defendant is guilty. Now, I'm going to write that a little bit differently because when we talk about this, generally speaking, what we're really doing is we're rejecting, and this is kind of crazy, the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis. So we're rejecting his innocence or her innocence in favor of their guilt. Okay? We're rejecting the null in favor of the alternative. And for us to make that decision, how much evidence does there have to be? In the American judicial criminal system, what is the evidence? Some of you guys pre-law, aren't you? Anthony, aren't you pre-law? Yeah. Oh, you're not anymore?
No, I still am.
All right. So how much evidence does there have to be for us to find him guilty or her guilty? Beyond reasonable doubt. And if you think about it, so this evidence offered has to be over some line, right? And the line is beyond, in a criminal justice, it's beyond reasonable doubt. I don't know if you know, there's a difference in a criminal trial, Tony. It's not beyond reasonable doubt, it's what? There's a different line. It doesn't have to be as high. I think they say it's preponderance of evidence or something like that. You'd have to Google it to know for sure because I think I might be BSing here. But I know it's a different line. I think it's the preponderance of evidence. So if the evidence offered is over that line, we make decision 1, right? And that line in a criminal trial is beyond reasonable doubt. Does this make sense? If it's not, what decision do we make? And I want you to be careful how you say this. If it's not over that line, what does the jury say? Very good. And what did she didn't say innocent. What did she say? She said not guilty. There's a difference. Because we haven't found the person innocent. We haven't said you're innocent. We just said we don't have enough evidence to find you guilty. So it's different, right? We don't say accept the null. And I'm going to show you what we say. We say decision 2 is the defendant we find is not guilty. It's kind of a negative, right? We don't say is innocent. We didn't find the person innocent. We just said there's not enough evidence to find them guilty. So how we write that in terms of general hypothesis testing is not accept the null. We just say, and it's kind of crazy because it's a double negative, we say do not reject the null in favor of the alternative. Okay, there's many people that were found not guilty that are guilty as sin, right? That they know they're guilty, everyone knows they're guilty, God knows they're guilty, but there just wasn't enough evidence to find them so, right? You guys know that, yes? Okay, so that's an important difference. Now, when we do this, so this all carries on in statistical hypothesis testing as well. When we do this, we can be wrong. And when we're wrong, we call those errors. And there's two types of errors. If we make decision 1 and it's wrong, we call it a type 1 error. And it's like Roman numeral 1, type 1 error. So if I make a type 1 error in a criminal trial, what have I done? If I've committed a type 1 error, what have I done? I made decision 1 and I was wrong to do so. What have I done? I've convicted an innocent man, right? If I make decision 1 and I'm wrong, I've committed a type 1 error. Now, statistically speaking, the probability of a type 1 error is alpha. Where have I seen alpha before? Where have we seen alpha? Just not too long ago. Yeah, 1 minus alpha was percentage of times it's right. So alpha, very good, right? So think about it. When we talked about confidence level, the minimum confidence level we're willing to accept was what? You guys recall? 90%. So what do you think the minimum error rate the maximum error rate I'm willing to accept? 10%, right? And usually better than that, okay? If we make decision 2 and we're wrong, crazily enough, we call that a type 2 error. And the probability of a type 2 error is denoted as beta. It's like a capital B with a big tail. And if in a criminal trial, if we've committed a type 2 error, what have we done? In a criminal trial, if we've committed a type 2 error, what have we done? Right. We said not guilty. We didn't find them innocent. We said not guilty when really they were guilty, right? So that's a type 2 error. Now, in statistical hypothesis testing and in the numerical judicial system, what error do we try to guard against? Which error is more egregious? Egregious meaning bad, that we try to make sure it doesn't happen. Which error do we say is more egregious for us to have? Type 1, right? We say we'd rather 100 guilty men go free than convict 1 innocent man, right? So the same thing is going to be true in statistical tests. This is the error we're really guarding against. Because if you think about it, if we're trying to prove something, okay, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that there's enough evidence to say that. So all these things that I've laid out are going to be used in statistical hypothesis testing as well. Short story, has anyone ever been part of a criminal trial? Like on a jury, not like convicted, but on a jury or anything like that?
Jury. Like
Do you have jury duty?
We're not old enough. My dad did.
No, you don't have to be 18 to be on jury duty.
Yeah, but I don't pay taxes. My dad
You
does.
don't pay tax for you. Well, I was the foreman of a criminal trial probably about 15 years ago in Cambria County, and it was a 2-day trial, and you're not allowed talking about it during, you go to, you're with these other jurors, but you can't talk about it. So 2 days, this guy is guilty as sin, right? I mean, they're paging him. This is old school. This is like 15, 20. There's no cell phone. They're paging him. He shows up, gives an undercover informant crack, or crank, I think it was. Right? 8 ball. What's 8 ball? I don't know. I remember the term 8 ball. But anyways, it was drugs. And anyways, like several times. And they were trying to get him to roll on his superior, and he wouldn't. This guy is guilty of sin. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the easiest deliberation ever. We're gonna get in there, get the hell out, find him guilty, get out. Well, there's like two people saying, oh, I don't think he's guilty. I mean, they're passing around the evidence room like, I'm holding drugs, right? Which is crazy. And this old lady and this young guy were like, I don't think it's beyond reasonable doubt. You know, they were nice people. Like, I'm like, no, he's guilty. So it's Friday and it's like 4:30, 5 o'clock. So I go down and tell the judge, I said, hey judge, you know, there's two people saying no, so we're gonna have a hung jury. He's like, no, you're not. He goes, I'm ordering pizza and you guys are staying all night until you know, like I'm keeping you here till like midnight, till you come to, so I go back and I tell the group that, right? I say, hey, he says he's ordering pizza and, you know, we're staying all night because they put too much time in this trial. And wouldn't you know it, because those two people are like, well, they want to do something Friday night apparently. They're like, all right, he's guilty. I kid you not. True story. And then, crazy, you know, I guilty, he's staring at me. He's like, his name's, I shouldn't say it. I Googled him just recently and he's still out there. But anyways, you know, he's staring at me like he has a big ponytail and like, yeah, guilty, guilty, guilty. And then we go down to the basement of the courthouse and have like a pizza party after convicting this guy. It's crazy. So that's the justice system. Yeah. All right, I'll see you Thursday. No homework.
Great.